Our speaker today is Steve Kurkjian. Steve is enjoying a long and storied career as one of the most acclaimed investigative reporters in the entire United States. A 40-year veteran of the Boston Globe, Steve served as the paper's Washington bureau chief and was also a founding member of its investigative spotlight team. By all accounts, he did a good job. He has won, so far, more than 25 national and regional awards, including 3 Pulitzer Prizes.
This story, too, compelled me a lot because of its Boston roots. As I looked at it and worked on it for the Globe in the 1990s, it had everything that a great mystery did have. I like to think of it as Boston's last best secret. The 2 other secrets of Boston, which I consider to be the greatest scandals of our time. One, that Whitey Bulger had a secret relationship with the FBI. And the second, that the Cardinal, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese, was covering up, hiding abuse by more than several of its priests by failing to report them to the authorities. Both those stories were told by the Boston Globe, both of them told by the Globe Spotlight team. Both of those stories had purpose. And I felt a sense of purpose in taking on this story. Because understand what we're talking about. We're talking about $500,000 of valuables stolen. And it's not bonds, it's not even diamonds, stocks or cash. This is the artistic achievement of the ages. And so it compelled me. I felt if you could help in getting this artwork back, you've done something good at the end of your career, at the end of my career. So, and my father was an artist. He was a commercial artist, and he liked the masters whose works were represented in the Gardner Museum. Understand, Mrs. Gardner, she was married, came to Boston, married one of the richest Brahmins in the area in 1860. She had an interest in art from her earliest days. And after their first and only child died, not in childbirth, but as a youth, her husband, Jack Gardner, began world travels with her so she could enjoy and give voice to this passion of art. And they bought and they bought and they bought, and all the artwork that they bought on the road, they would, in the greatest capitals of the world, she would send back to the United States, to her home on Beacon Hill. That home filled up. And therefore, she bought the house next door. That home filled up. They bought the house next door on the other side, and that home filled up. So, and she was a flamboyant, not vivacious, but intellectually vivacious. She wasn't really interested in political, but she was interested in art, in intellect. And she and her husband, as they continued their travels, decided in the 1870s period that they would, once they retired, that they would build a museum in Boston. Then they went back out on the road. The cities that they visited were not just European capitals. These were they went to the Far East, they went to the Middle East, and they bought not just art, not just paintings, but they bought statuary and also antiques. So when she brought them back and they found this site in the Fens to build this museum, she had a sense of purpose. Her husband died in 1890s, passed away. She came in off the road. She stopped traveling, she had already engaged him, a young man who was an art connoisseur, great art appreciator, and he went out and he continued purchasing for her. And the artwork that she collected, it's hard to describe, but understand, in front of the Boston Public Library, where, the center of intellect in Boston, there is a statue towards artistic achievement. 8 names are listed on that statue. The artists of the eons, not just the ages, for all time. 6 of those artists have their works on display at the Gardner Museum. So her interests were varied, were wide, and she spent about 6 years overseeing, from the 1890s to 1903, overseeing the construction of this museum. right in the Fens area. And when it opened, she declared that there would be no charge for admission. And the reason why she wanted no charge was she had a higher goal than just to present and appreciate and enjoy. She wanted to inspire us Bostonians, us art appreciators, the couth and the uncouth, because she saw you can never know where that next Rembrandt, Vermeer, Michelangelo is going to come from. And so she wanted to make sure everyone got, every Bostonian, every art appreciator, like I say, the known and the unknown, got access to her artwork. So it was free of charge. And Boston flocked to it. Understand, she was a combination of Julia Child and Courtney Love. She had a flamboyant side to her that her parties were the best in the city. And but she had this one goal, to inspire us, Americans, to come up with an American tradition of art. What she found was, as she traveled the world over, that what set these civilizations apart, the civilizations that had thrived and survived and went on into history, was not their political or military might, but what made them special, what made them survive, was their artistic achievement. So she said, yes, America is becoming an industrial giant, but I want that, my goal, my hope would be, is we'd come up with an American tradition of art. So that's why people flocked to it and flocked to it. However, when she passed away in the mid-20s, her will had in it the seeds, what I think of, what happened in 1990, the theft from the museum. By that I mean, in her will, she prohibited anything in the collection to change. Nothing new could be added to the collection. Nothing new could be added to the walls. There are probably a dozen galleries on 3 stories. It's not a rambling, it's a block-long building, almost a block long. But as you go through, each room has its own statement about what she was looking for, and she didn't want that to change once she passed. What happened after she passed in the mid-20s, and it was a mandate, was if anything changes here, the artwork will be sold and the proceeds will be given to Harvard College. So, and it was a great museum at the time. It was the largest collection of artwork in a museum owned privately in the country. Later we had the Barnes, and later we had the Getty. But this is, and this is ours, Boston's. So, but with her passing, the oversight of the museum was turned over to a board of trustees. Understand what happens when the board of trustees has no mission. They don't need to raise money to buy a new collection, to open up a new wing. So they sort of sat in their hands, and with them sitting on their hands, the building began to fray. Security began to fray. The actual environment of the building began to fray. By the 70s and 80s, they hired their first security chief for the museum, and he said when he would come in the morning, like hot mornings like today, he would have to open the windows throughout the museum because there was no climate control system at the museum, and the paintings would be sweating, would be moisture on the paintings, and that's not a good thing. So so he went to the board of trustees, and they were good men, but they just weren't raising money. Understand, if you have a library, if you have a homeless shelter that you're on the board of trustees on, your goal there is to raise money so you can do more good work. They didn't have that mission. There was nothing prodding them to raise money. So when the museum, this new security director went to the museum and said, I need money, I fear we're going to have a broken pipe, it's going to ruin some paintings, or we're going to have a fire. And a small fire becomes big just like that. And when he went around the building, what he saw were these small little fire alarms like we have in our homes. So they said to him, you raise the money, you can do it, you go to your sources. And he raised $50,000, and they put in a new fire alarm system. And he felt, well, okay, now I can feel somewhat secure this is the mid-'80s. But the catastrophe that was awaiting was not fire, and it was not a broken pipe. It was two men dressed in Boston police uniforms who came up onto the side street of the museum, which is on Palace Road, and they rang the doorbell. It was March 18th, 1990. March 17th, this is in the early morning hours, like at 12:30 in the 1 o'clock in the morning. March 17th, just that night, day before, was the holy holiday of St. Patrick's Day here in Boston. And why I call it holy is because the city goes wild. And there are more police, on every street corner. And I think that was a motivation for the thieves. There'll be fewer police patrolling the city. So at around 1:15 in the morning of March 18th, some kids tumbled out of an apartment building. They had been at a party right next door to the museum, and they saw two men dressed in police uniforms in what appears to be a hatchback. And a hatch, it's a civilian car, and they said, "Gee." They were smart kids. They realized if some cops are doing surveillance or undercover work, they wouldn't be in a hatchback, and they wouldn't be dressed in police uniforms. But they both were tipsy, and they were underage, so they decided that they better clear out. They better not inquire what the cops were doing there. So they left. 5 minutes later, the cops drove up to the side door, rang the bell, and got allowed in. There were two night watchmen working the shift that night. One of them had never worked the shift before. He had been called in because the other guy had been sick. One had worked, and it was a veteran. He had worked there for months. He loved the job. He was a rock and roller. And he loved the job because the job allowed him to show up at work at midnight just after coming off a gig at one of Boston's seedier nightclubs. So, and he had a pretty good band. Wasn't making much of a dent, but musically it was a pretty good band. And he told me when I interviewed him, often he would come to work stoned or drunk. But he said I was particular about my job, and there really wasn't much going on. No one came to the door. Well, that's what he said when I interviewed him in 2005 and 2010, and for my book in 2014. Last week, we got a clue about how truthful he may be being with me and the authorities. And what I meant was this caused a big stir, and some of you may have seen it. The night before, and this had never been shown by the authorities, there was a videotaping system in existence at the museum. So throughout the night, there was 4 cameras that showed the empty streets and the empty galleries in 10-second flashes. The night before the theft, out of nowhere, you see on the video that was released to the public, you see a car backing up onto Palace Road, and a man coming out and ringing the doorbell and being allowed in, staying for a minute or less than a minute, and then walking out. Doesn't seem to be hiding his face, but one thing we know, this was a apparent breach of security. They had the same night watchman who let them in the next night, the bad guys in the next night, breached security the night before. Now he said to me, and he said to the authorities over the years, I never let anybody in. I don't know who those thieves were, never saw them before, never saw them again. But despite his assertions of innocence and non-complicity, now we know he let someone in the night before. So the case has gotten a lot of attention. I think my book, and this being the 25th anniversary, has caused there to be some further interest in the case this year. The feds work it very hard. Unfortunately, one thing they didn't do, which I've criticized them in my book about, is they didn't open the investigation into a task force, which would allow there to be both state and local police on the team. And what I think why that would have been good is because there would have been outside influences. The feds are good because they're able to do surveillance and electronic surveillance that the state and local cops cannot do. But the local cops know the bad guys. They know who dresses up as police officers. They know who disguises themselves. They know who, is threatening but is not violent. Who's violent but not threatening. They know everybody on the criminal side. They weren't allowed in. Their resources or their expertise could have been called on, but unless they're part of the task force, they're not going to give up information. They're like all of us. Unless I get the credit, I'm not doing the hard work. So they did not participate. And I think that this investigation lacked something. And in fact, that this tape that has been in the FBI's possession for 25 years, my sense is, they say they knew about the tape. I'm sure they did know they had a week or a month's worth of old tapes. But my sense is they never put them into the VCR. Remember she doesn't remember the VCR. Do you remember the VCR? You press it, thing would get all curled up. Try to back it up. Remember that? So, but that's what they had. And they never, my sense is they never, because had they, what this has done is, by only showing it 25 years later, it's given the night watchman who made the grievous errors of letting the bad guys in, it's given him an out. And that out is, gee, it's been 25 years. I don't recognize who that might have been, and I don't recognize that I let somebody in the night before. If they had asked him that a year after or 2 years after the event, they're gonna put him in thumb screws. But now it's given him, unfortunately, it's given him a defense. That story remains to be, fully told. But newspaper reporters like myself, the FBI, local authorities are interested in it. My sense, though, is that the essential clue, understand, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office has had on the table for 25 years, since this artwork is missing, an offer, at least for the last 10 years, and that offer is, bring us our artwork, bring us our artwork, bring us our artwork back. Don't make fun. Don't make fun. You're in an armed camp here. Bring it back, and you'll get, there's a $5 million award. It's been on the table for at least 15 years. Bring it back. We care about the condition of the paintings, but whatever condition they're in, you get the $5 million. So it's hard to understand why, and we won't prosecute you. But it's hard to understand, why hasn't this offer resulted in a recovery, in a return? Why? And you don't even have to, just go through a lawyer. And your lawyer will represent you, and your identity won't be known. People won't be asking you questions, and you'll have $5 million in your bank account. It hasn't. The FBI told me in 2010 they haven't had a single proof of life sighting of any of the 13 pieces of artwork. 13 pieces, 3 Rembrandts and a Vermeer. The Rembrandt, one Rembrandt is Rembrandt's only seascape, Storm of the Sea of Galilee. I like to say, if you get too close to that painting, you'd get wet from the spray. That's how vivid the sea is in his painting. He loved the painting so much he painted himself in it. There's a little character hanging over the side of the boat that's being storm tossed. It's Rembrandt. The Vermeer is the only one of 35, 36 Vermeers known to have been done. It's the only Vermeer in all of New England, and all the Northeast. So understand, we're talking of a legacy of artwork that is untold. It's so important to what she was looking to do, which was to inspire us, inspire you, inspire us to come up with an American tradition of art. So my idea on solving this crime, this awful crime, goes to her goal in having that art up on the wall. On the walls now are the empty frames. And you go into the Gardner Museum, you go into the second floor gallery, it's sort of like going into a very sad, quiet and sad place. It's darker, and seeing those golden, rich brocade frames, but empty on the walls, is heartbreaking. This is what I would do. We have to make Boston feel, the Boston population, who knows some secrets. The FBI says the two people who did it are dead. Whether that's true or not remains to be seen. But they haven't given up their secret. They haven't come from the dead, and they haven't, if they are alive, they haven't given up their secret. But people who are close to them know some pieces of the puzzle. They may not know where it's buried. And that's what the FBI, that's what the authorities need. And they need that essential tip that, if not give it the actual 02124 zip code, it'll give you 617 or 718 area code. Give you a general idea. And it's those people who haven't picked up the phone that need to be convinced that it's in our best interest. It's in the city's best interest. And not to have the FBI in front of the frames, not even the Gardner Museum, trustees or a director, but have people who can generate credibility in the bad guy world. The city is not a racist city anymore, thank God, but it is still tribal. There is still haves and have-nots, and the have-nots don't give it up. They don't give. There's a no snitch policy out of the have-not world. And what I think is the way to get them to feel the loss, to make them pick up the phone, is not the $5 billion reward, but to get them to say, what she had this on the wall was for us. We haven't seen them for 25 years. Our children haven't seen them for 25 years. We've got grandchildren now coming. You have grandchildren. We have grandchildren. Let's get this artwork. It serves no purpose for them to be buried. You cannot show this to anybody within your criminal gang, within your family, with any of your neighborhoods. You can't show it. They're buried. So why not take advantage of the reward, get the artwork returned to the museum, restored, put back on the wall, and to bring back this legacy that she wanted this artwork for, to inspire the next generation to come up with an American tradition of art. And I think so whom would I put in front of the wall? I would put Mayor Walsh. He has a history, a background, a biography of redemption, as well as Cardinal O'Malley, and have them reach out to the Boston public and say, help us. We're a world-class city now. You walk around this place and you really feel that you're in a city that can compare to Venice, to Lisbon, to Yerevan. We once thought we could be an Olympian city. We don't think that anymore. But be that as it may, we are a city very proud. We are a city that recovered from a devastating attack in 2013, and has made us stronger and more united. I think to get this back will give us another sense, as great a sense of achievement. And guess what we get back? The only Rembrandt seascape, the only Vermeer in all of the Northeast, as well as 11 other pieces of artwork. So I think it's a great mission. My book conveys much of it, and I hope that those of you who have bought it are ready to sign it. And I have ready to answer any questions you might have. But thank you for coming out today. Yeah, great question. What Dolores Kong, the world's greatest stockbroker and financial advisor, is asking us is, why do I think it's here and not in, South Africa or in on the walls of some Saudi or whatever criminal enterprise prince? And the reason is this: the way they treated the artwork that they stole was not commissioned. They were not commissioned by some art appreciator. They broke the frames of the Rembrandts. They cut the Rembrandts out of their backings. Now, no art appreciator is wanting, it's already badly damaged by cutting it out of the frames. So, and every frame was cracked, glass all around. So my sense was another motive that prompted this artwork, and not appreciation. And that motive is, I identified the motive and who had the real interest to fulfill that motive in my last chapter. But that's really, I don't think there's no, Thomas Crown Affair, Pierce Brosnan plays the leading role. There's no Pierce Brosnan here. There's no Pierce Brosnan. These are Boston thugs who took advantage of an opening and succeeded. As the museum's security had fallen, and the security people on that night were not paying attention as they should have been. Well, again, thank you very much for coming, and ready to inscribe any books you might buy. Appreciate you coming. Thank you for having me, Larry.
Air inside him expanded. He tapped his traction control button twice to turn on the competitive driving control, but the expedition sped up.